Welcome to another episode of Click Happens. My name is Doug Kreitzberg with SeedPod Cyber, and joined as always by the more intelligent of our team, our Kyle Saudi, who's our CRO and EVP of Underwriting, and Sinclaire Morris, who heads up our MSP partnerships. Kyle, Sinclaire, how are you guys?
Good. Cold. We got snow here. So
all right, Sinclaire, you just back you have a sweater on and you're in Florida.
Yeah, well, we like our air conditioning here in Florida, but it is in the 60s today. So.
It was in the 60s. Okay, all right. We're feeling for you there. But good. Well, I hope that you ate whatever food helps your brain function, because we're really going to go into tackle some big subjects today, especially for those of you who are managed service providers here. And we have and it's around the concept of we'll talk about cyber insurance, and it's what carriers are doing these days, and what you can expect next year. We'll also talk about ways in which you can, work with cyber insurance in your own practice in a way that doesn't, run you into issues of regulatory risk or any adding on any additional liabilities there. And then there's also some things going on in the ransomware world that beyond, the U.S. borders, that are beginning to have an impact to those businesses in the U.S. So we'll talk about that too. But the first is just to touch on what are the changes that cyber insurance carriers are making to their products and what they're delivering, and just to give a little bit of background, the cyber insurance marketplace really started growing, with the pandemic, and with as ransomware started to hit the fan. You saw rates going up. You saw some carriers exiting the market, but then you started to see a lot more carriers coming into the market. And as those carriers started coming in the market, because they saw those high rates, they wanted to take advantage of it. You then began to have, as usually happens, a lot of competition coming in. So the rates started going down, and it almost became a flight to the bottom. Everyone was trying to be $1 or less expensive than the other, and then it went from being $1 less expensive to maybe, not asking as tough security questions as they were before. And so you have these interesting dynamics going on where if you're a carrier, you want to continue to grow year over year. You want to grow responsibly, in other words, profitably there, but you're kind of stuck because you're dealing with having to compete on a price basis here. So that's the kind of the background. What some carriers are doing is they're beginning to supplement their insurance services with security services. And Kyle, can you kind of speak to, kind of frame that as to what that actually looks like now?
Yeah, there, like you said, Doug, there's been an evolution here. And I think that evolution went from a good idea where there was trying to help and maybe protect insurance books, which I'll talk about, to a very forward, we're going to make revenue off clients and compete potentially with MSPs or other MSSPs, things like that, which I think has been really challenging. I think some of the things I'm seeing is carriers moving towards models where they're trying to get money around security assessments and scanning, things like that. SOC monitoring, that's a big thing. So an evolution of EDR, like MXDR, MDR solutions and that. And while the whole market hasn't adopted it, because you could imagine that's a pretty big investment if you're an insurance company to just try and start going into that realm. Some of the leading carriers out there have started to really put money behind this and try and do that. Going back to my earlier comment about how this may have started as a good idea, but then continued. I used to work for an insurance company that realized, I think this was like 2019, 2020. They were looking at the book, and this was during really the beginning of the pandemic. Most companies moved online. They realized that RDP, remote desktop protocol, was a massive reason for ransomware attacks. So some clients weren't putting MFA around that. It was just kind of open, and that's how a lot of threat actors were getting in. And they were able to do a scan on their book, basically an external scan, and they realized that if these clients had put in MFA around it, they would have saved about 30 to 40 million in losses in a year time period, which was pretty big. So what they started to do was they started to notify their clients and say, hey, listen, we have this scan. Here's the IP address. Please either shut this down or put MFA around it. I think that is a good thing when an insurance company is maybe seeing that and trying to do it. That wasn't a revenue generating function. That was just, hey, there's this exposure. Take a look at it and remediate it ASAP, so you don't have an event. That's a good idea. I'm not the biggest fan of flipping that and saying, like, let's start making money off this and generating revenue. And the reason for that is I think there's always going to be an intersection. There's a big intersection today of cyber insurance and technology companies. And it's like, how do those merge and come together? But if you're creating this business model as an insurance company where you're starting to offer these services for revenue, you're competing with the managed service providers out there or the MSSPs. You're taking business away from them. But also, I look at it as these MSPs and MSSPs are really the experts. They have a ton of experience in this and really know what they're doing. And then I also think there's a big distribution challenge there. And, if you're an insurance company, and who are you asking to sell this product or service? You do business with a broker before you get to the client. So are you asking the broker who's selling the insurance to also sell the technology? That broker's too busy doing their day job, and they're not tech experts. So I just see a lot of challenges in it. Obviously, part of that is our model over at SeedPod, where we partner with MSPs and we say, you guys are the experts on the tech side. We're the experts on the insurance placement. Let's do a marriage and let's come out and kind of do this together. And it's been wildly successful.
Yeah. So it is an interesting change and questionable directions. Sinclaire, you're working with MSPs every day. Are they starting to see this play out? Are they seeing this type of insurance where the insurer's trying to offer solutions that actually compete with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say just in the last few weeks, I've spoken to at least a handful, new partners who are coming on board because they want to get in front of it, which is understandable. But yeah, it's definitely something we're seeing increasingly in the wild. I won't name names. I know there's a few carriers that come to mind that I know I've seen it on. And yeah, I mean, I agree with what Kyle mentioned. I also think, just from a user experience side, I think it also kind of complicates things. So now you've got this MSP who's worked with this client. They're the one point of contact. And then you start layering in these topical threat scans. Those results are being sent to clients. It kind of adds to this confusion of like, who's really our main point for resolving these issues, because the client might get a scan that the insurance company has done, and now what do they do with it, right? Where does it fall? Whose responsibility at the end of the day is it?
Right. There, and I think it kind of follows on, broadly speaking, in the insurance space. The desire to have preventative services as a component of the insurance offer. And you see this more, I think, in, the homeowner space, where they're trying to offer discounts if you have a a flow monitor, water flow monitor, so you can tell if there's a pipe is broken, and because it trips a monitor that can inform a service or inform the insured that, hey, you're away on a trip and your pipes have frozen or something, and you have a leak, right? So you don't come home and open the door and get washed down the street, and then pay a lot, have to insurance pay a lot there. So you're seeing that today. Is that a bad thing, or is it more, it's not a bad thing, but more in the implementation? Like, is there a place for preventative guidance that insurers can provide that still, maintain the integrity of who needs to actually, put the services in place and fix it?
Yeah, I think there's a place for it, and I do think, of course, there's clients out there that maybe aren't really working with an MSP. Maybe there's a lot of stuff they have in house. So providing general guidance, if you are a large cyber insurance carrier and you have some expertise there, I think that's a good thing. I definitely think that would be a good thing. But again, it's finding the line of balance. And I think when you're proactively setting up a part of your business that's revenue generating on these things, I think Sinclaire nailed it. There can be a lot of confusion for the clients.
Right.
I also, I never saw this play out, but what happens if the insurance company is running the MXDR and then there's a breach and it's kind of the MXDR's fault for missing something and they're insured? Then it really starts to get kind of confusing, and I don't know. It seems like that would be a challenge.
Right. Yeah, I kind of feel you have to have a dividing line between, notification at the most, and the resolution of the service. I mean, it would be like, and maybe they'll start doing it, and I don't think it's a good thing either, but where you have Geico showing up with a pipe wrench, right? Well, and do you really, is that what you want? Is that what you want the little gecko to be doing?
Really heavy for that gecko.
Right. That would be heavy for the gecko. They would need to come up with a alligator or something to represent the plumber. But I don't really think that is, and right now, are the MSPs viewing this as a positive to them when they start seeing carriers coming in and saying, we'll take care of your security?
Not in my conversations, no. And I think it leaves them with kind of a interesting decision. Do they ignore the carrier tool that's being offered entirely? Do they partially integrate it, or fully support something they really didn't choose? I think it kind of just makes things a little more difficult for them as well, and they could lose business because of it.
Right. That's interesting too, because I just had a thought while you said that. We're so focused on partnering with MSPs and really with a big end goal of trying to solve that challenge of 70% of small businesses in the US do not purchase cyber. And again, we believe the way towards that is partnership with the MSPs. And really, you could say by going down that route, it's getting further away from solving that challenge. Because honestly, if I was an MSP and I had a cyber insurance company reaching out saying, we want to partner with you on this piece, but by the way, we're also going to sell this, which competes with you, I'd be like, I'm not doing that. I'd be too nervous of my own business to try and partner and do an expansion. So it almost seems backwards.
Right. Yeah, I think the whole, the insurance marketplace, I think it's fair to say, doesn't understand the role of the MSP, doesn't understand the MSP channel, and to the extent that they do understand it, they kind of denigrate it. They kind of say, well, your MSP isn't doing a good job. We can do it better. And I don't think that's a long-term play there. And you're right, Sinclaire. I think, the client itself is the one who just gets confused. I get a note, and I'm insured through a company that will send me stuff. Now we have you can install this thing in your system and it will give you, and I don't even know what it will give me. And I'm in cyber insurance and I know cybersecurity. I don't want to put the tool in. I don't know what it's going to do. And I don't know what the benefit to me is. And then what is it, other than, is it just a surveillance device by this company to, and then I have an MSP that I work with. I don't know. It just seems to be confusing. And I can't imagine businesses really kind of understanding everything. When I get a note from the insurance carrier, I'm going to assume it's a bill, or I'm going to assume it's they're trying to tell me that do something, or other my premiums are going to go up. So I just don't view them as my partner, right? In this situation. And I think a lot of businesses will feel the same way here. But I get why the carriers are doing it, because they can't make money the old-fashioned way through the insurance, because the pricing has become soft here. I just don't think it's the right. I think they're solving the wrong problem with the wrong solution there. Just kind of switching over. So the MSPs, they don't want to deal with the insurance carriers as competition. So they say, well, I want to partner with insurance, operations, so I can kind of be a step ahead of them. And then the question comes up, how can I do this in a way that doesn't get me into, add more liability to me? Insurance is regulated. I don't want, what am I allowed to say? What I'm not allowed to say? My clients are coming to me saying, what do I, is this insurance any good? I want to actually require my clients to have insurance, but they show me the policy, and how do I know it's good? So from a what's the best way, or are there any issues to this, and what should the MSPs be thinking about when they're thinking about insurance partnerships? Sinclaire, do you have any thoughts to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely one of the most common questions we get from, new partners who are new to our program. They're very apprehensive about even just bringing the subject up with their clients, because they're afraid it will somehow assume liability to them. Obviously, in our program, we know that's not the case. I think just in general, though, for MSPs, having those conversations, because they are very important. And also, not only to make sure your client is adequately protected, but to make sure that you're, providing the controls the carrier expects to be in place, and also for incident response. So, it is very, I think, natural for the MSP now to start thinking about involving cyber insurance in the conversations. Insurance is regulated. You're not going to want to make specific recommendations. Of course, I think making an observation would be fair. And then saying, I'd like to connect you with someone who is a licensed agent, would be smart. I wouldn't make any solid recommendations or anything stating, this amount of limits is sufficient for your company, because we never know what's going to happen. It could likely be sufficient, but at the end of the day, if something catastrophic happens, it could not be. So making no real, what is the word I'm looking for? Not concrete, but like specific recommendations around what they should or shouldn't do. And then I also think on the flip side of that, a lot of our partners have gone as far as having paper trail saying, here was the recommendations that were provided. The client stated they did not want to proceed. And that way they almost add an additional layer of protection for themselves, saying, look, we had the conversation, we recommended that they should have a policy in place, and they chose not to.
Right. Yeah. And there's kind of the two components there, right? One is if you want to protect yourself in the event the client has an incident, and they start pointing the finger at you as the cause, or that you were negligent as an MSP in your duties there. So you definitely want to have that paper trail. And then there's the regulatory issues around, what can and can't be done by a unlicensed entity with regards to having insurance conversations. And in that respect, you really need to, refrain from talking about coverage in any substantive degree. And how does that, what's the right way for that realistically to play out, Kyle? What the MSP is going to be asked, because they're a trusted partner of the client, and what can the MSP say, and what should they defer to, the insurance agent, broker, or someone like SeedPod if they have a partnership with them?
Honestly, I think separation is key. And for me, it would be deferral from the MSP to basically just the brand saying, and again, we'll choose ourselves for a second here, but when we're talking to one of our MSP partners, I think they should really kind of stick to the, like, hey, we've worked with SeedPod, we know they're experts over here. Listen to them on the placements, and if there's any issues, they can talk to us in that. But as Sinclaire was kind of alluding to, I would really, if I was an MSP, I would want to stay away from, opinion on a carrier, opinion on what type of limits or premiums, that sort of thing. And in fact, when I do get to talk to our MSP partners, they're quite excited to hand off those type of questions as well. So yeah, I think really just trying to pass that all to us is really key.
Right. And we've developed a tool to help them. We call it the insurability audit, where the MSP can ask the client for a copy of their insurance policy if they have one, and we run an analysis there where we look at the gaps in the insurance policy and whether there's enough insurance in place. And then we also look at the gaps in the control environment. Are the controls in place such that carrier would actually pay off on a claim, or be, or be in a position where it'll be tough not to pay off. And that way, the conversation kind of breaks down into two areas. One is, what do you need to do from an insurance perspective? And that's the role we play. And then the MSP talks about what that client, should be thinking about to mitigate those controls, put those control, in place, whether it's EDR or backup or MFA, et cetera, there. And it becomes very clean, through that process there. The other thing is, question comes up, if I refer business, can I get paid on that? And that's where there are issues called rebating, which are generally prohibited in the insurance marketplace. There are exceptions to it. Mostly the exceptions have to do if you're providing services more to support the underwriting side of it there. And that's something that, through our partnership, we're able to do, because the MSPs are actually part of our underwriting process there. But it's not a it's as long as, I think, if you're an MSP and you are working with an entity that you can confidently let them handle the insurance, so that you're not, an active party in the coverage discussions, pricing, underwriting, or decisions, and that you're providing services to support that, that's the best way to play there with regards to it. We have a little bit of time left, and the there's actually ransomware is becoming global, or maybe more global than it was. Kyle, can you kind of speak to what's going on?
Yeah, there was a updated article or report indicating that threat actors were moving away, or at least targeting temporarily outside of the traditional hotspots. So when I think of hotspots, I think the U.S. first and foremost, and then Europe, definitely a hotspot. And the reason why they've been targeting those areas to begin with is obvious. It's the old Willie Sutton saying, because the money's there, money's in the bank. Well, the money's in the U.S. and Europe and that. But perhaps there could be some fatigue around that. Perhaps there could be a combination of clients taking cybersecurity more serious and starting to increase controls, and there's less low hanging fruit. So there's been an expansion. Threat actors starting to target kind of additional countries that weren't targeted before. So some of the ones I saw was Latin America, Asia, Middle East, some of those locations. And again, I can't stress, threat actors are just looking for the easy low-hanging fruit. It's not that there's threat actors out there that can't crack the most complex systems, but why would you spend that time and try and do that if you can go over and just enter a company because they're lacking MFA around RDP or something like that? So that's where I think there's been an expansion, and they're probably testing those markets to see what they can get paid. Unfortunately, these threat actors look at it like a business. They go to work every single day. They take holidays. It's terrible to think about it that way, but that's how it is. So they're testing additional markets and seeing what kind of success they have. And once they infiltrate a system, can they get paid or not? So it's unfortunate, but I think the piece we all need to remember is, look, at this is truly a global issue. And there's things you can do to protect yourself, especially if you're a global company, and outside of cyber protections and good controls. That's why the insurance piece is so important, that if you do get compromised, that you have that backing, not only from a financial perspective, but you also have access to the vendors that can help you deal with a terrible situation.
Right. There. Sinclaire, what are your thoughts on this expansion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I wonder if, and Kyle, you could probably answer this question, but like looking at underwriting for global companies, has it previously been where like the security controls that, carriers are looking for is just confirmed for headquarters, which then may have security controls that some of their other locations don't? Does that play a role in this?
Yeah. I'll tell you, yes, that's a challenge. Part of the challenge is the way underwriting is set up in the marketplace. You only have so much time and can only get so much information. In an ideal world, an underwriter would love to move into a company and learn everything about it. We obviously know that's not possible. But I remember I dealt with one of the biggest companies in the US, and there was a tremendous amount of underwriting on this company. And about a year later, one of their subsidiaries somewhere in Europe that was covered under the policy had a big claim, big one that was covered. And once we dug into the underwriting on that subsidiary, we realized that subsidiary was way behind a controls perspective from corporate. And then obviously the underwriting switched to that. So you kind of see it's very complex when you start to get global and different entities. And companies will try to do the underwriting as much as they can, but also as a business, you have to still be kind of efficient and get things done. So there's definitely gaps there.
Yeah.
I think the other gap, which is an issue, whether it's global or just, US based, is how do you underwrite third-party risk effectively? So we're all connected, as we all talk about, and supply chain is a big issue. We've seen that many times, sometimes playing out in the in the cyber insurance space, where you have a Change Healthcare that goes down to a ransomware attack, and Change Healthcare is providing, pharmaceuticals and logistics to thousands of healthcare providers, and that has a big effect. Very difficult to underwrite it there. Any success stories, Kyle, has anyone cracked the code on that?
No, I would say there's been negative stories of underwriting companies trying to overdo it. I think it's just, I think it's an assumed exposure, a book exposure when you're underwriting. I think there's some high level questions you can ask around how do you deal with tiering of partner vendors.
Right.
Might have critical one where they get access to everything, down the list to you, they just get a little bit. That's kind of the best thing you can do as a company. But larger insurance companies, honestly, that's part of why they're buying reinsurance and insurance for themselves to try and hedge it. So I think they really just look at it as it's part of the exposure, and there's only a company can do.
Right. Well, we're doing a lot of work on the underwriting, automating a lot of processes, which we'll be excited to talk to you about there. We haven't figured out the third-party risk. So I just happen to have a $10 bill that I will gladly give to anyone who wants to submit a way that we can underwrite third-party risk that we can actually implement in a frictionless process there. So I'm going to keep.
Would you send that in the mail? How would you deliver that? Is that
this will be
right?
Well, maybe I'll translate this into Bitcoin. But in any event, it is here and it's waiting for you. So some bright, enterprising person can reach out there. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate, Kyle, Sinclaire, your time as always, and your input. And thanks for all of you listening in. And tune in to next week, which is right before the holidays. We'll do a end of year wrap up, as everyone does, and we'll talk about wrappers. Well, Kyle and Sinclaire will talk about wrappers. I'll be asking questions about what they are as well. So, but it's must listen to podcast or much watch podcast next week. But take care, everyone. See ya.
See ya.
Thank you.